Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we've got another walking tour for you, this time of the forward O2 deck. The O2 deck interior spaces are divided in half because of the ship's expansion joint, which I'm standing on right now. Rather than extending the expansion joint up another level, they cut it off here and they divided the forward nav superstructure. This allows the ship to flex some, and you can see behind me that really there's just this little breezeway just over maybe a curator and a half wide that's separating the aft part of the O2 superstructure from the forward part. So our first space back here is a former museum office, which is how it's set up right now, but it's been abandoned for years. This space is only accessible through the exterior. Interestingly, there's two doors, one port and starboard. And it seems like earlier in the ship's career, there was a dividing bulkhead down the center of this space. And in the 1980s, that was knocked out to turn it into the 5th Division office, which is the starboard side 5-inch guns. Now we're out on the port side here. You can see where one of the 5-inch guns was removed. Notice that nothing was really built in its place. The reason for this being removed is because with all the stuff added in the 80s, it has completely lost its arc of fire. It used to be able to train aft, but this whole section of superstructure here was added to encase some of the Tomahawk equipment. It used to be able to fire outboard, but this larger boat davit was installed. And its forward arc of fire has always been partially obstructed by the forward superstructure and the more forward 5-inch guns. On some of the other Iowa-class battleships, this was built up as a box with these ready service lockers on it that you had to step up into. On New Jersey, they just plated the old hole where the 5-inch gun mount went through and then decked over it and installed this equipment. Because they decked over it in fur, that stuff was completely rotten by the time the museum got the ship, and we had to rip it up to save the steel underneath. That is only a temporary fix because now this becomes a swimming pool and the water just sits there. But this section of the deck is on our list of things to redeck in the near future. Coming around, just forward of that office, we've got the curve of the uptakes from the funnel, which you can see in there. And the Navy chose to blank this off into a little closet just so that you've got broom storage, essentially. There are a number of spaces like this where weird, odd angles where different things come together. The Navy just chose to put a flat piece of steel on the outside of that, throw a little door on it, and say, well, this is a storage closet now, which makes sense. You never have enough storage space on the ship. Heading forward, we're actually going into the forward superstructure here. These spaces are all berthing compartments for officers. You notice that from the blue tile on the deck. The port side berthing compartments, where we're looking right now, have not been restored. And you can see they're a little bit of a mess. When we get over to the starboard side, you'll see those are the ones that are actually on the tour route that have been restored. Interesting feature in this space, that round tube right there is the fire control wiring for the Mark 37 director for the 5-inch guns. That would be, let's see, Sky 2 that is receiving its power and sending its signals through that tube. You can also notice the old wardroom green paint that is under the newer white paint. Originally, this was painted wardroom green, which is what we expect to see. But in the 80s, the whole ship was repainted in white, which is what we see now. Continuing on, we have another similar stateroom. This one is much more spacious because it doesn't have that tube coming down in the way. And then a third stateroom. So there's 3 of these on each side of the ship. The stewards have a linen locker here. Just some shelves for some extra bedding and things like that. These are interesting spaces. As we come forward here, look at this little chip in the paint in the door. It's a gray door, but you can see there's that wood paint under it. And if you come inside here and look at the back of the door, you can see that it has that original wood panel paint job that important people got. Flag officers or the captain, in this case, Admiral's staff. So here we can see the underside of the flag bags where they cut through the deck. Because of that, there's not room for two racks in here. There's only room for one, so they chose to make it one of the senior Admiral staff staterooms. So that's what we've got here. Wood paneling. Obviously in the 1980s, New Jersey was reactivated not to be a flagship, so they paint over that door, and it was probably just assigned to some other senior officer. We're not quite sure the whole berthing arrangement. This is another space that has yet to be restored. As we continue out, you can see we've got one of the levels of the dumbwaiter. Because the O2 level had the flag cabins in it, there was also a flag mess up here. And so the dumbwaiter would have come up here so the stewards could get all the food that was then going to the Admiral's cabin and the flag mess. Here we've got another senior flag officer stateroom. Again, all the wood paint and furnishings, those go all the way back to World War II. This guy must have been important because he's got his own head. This space seems to have been heavily modified in the 1980s. The fold-out couch bed, actually with the back made out of plywood, and the file cabinet here, and some of this other stuff, the tiling in the bathroom, makes it seem like 1980s stuff. So off the top of my head, not sure who would have been berthed in here, but since it's a nice stateroom, clearly somebody claimed it. Many of the spaces on this side of the ship were heavily damaged by water intrusion leaking through the deck up above. And when we replaced the wood deck on the O3 level above us, that also allowed us to re-weld the deck and fix a lot of these damaged spaces. So that guy has his own head. Where do all of these other officers, who are presumably pretty high up if they're on the flag staff, go? Come on through here. Here we have another officer's head. So from here, you've got the ladder well that leads up to the O3 level with the flag bridge. There used to be another one in CEC, but on New Jersey it's removed. Some of the other Iowas retain it. Going down that P-way, you've got the other staterooms that more or less mirror the ones we've just seen. These are all restored, and you can see those when you come and do a regular tour. So we're not going to wander through them. Let's continue forward. As we come up here, we've got just 3 more spaces. First is this one. This is the Admiral's Chief of Staff stateroom. When Admiral Halsey was on board, his Chief of Staff was Rear Admiral Mick Carney. Because Halsey's stateroom is no longer in existence, as it would have been at that time, we have placed Admiral Halsey's original bed, which is on loan to the Museum from Naval History and Heritage Command, here in Admiral Carney's stateroom. This is one of the very few spaces on the ship that we have backdated to look like it would have in World War II. We have 3 criteria for that. First, it can't have been associated with anybody at later time periods. Because this was a guest stateroom for Admiral staff, it didn't have a officer permanently assigned. Second, it has to have been important in that prior time period. As the last good-looking flag space on the ship, it fits that bill. And thirdly, it has to have been damaged in some way or otherwise empty. We weren't going to go through and destroy original historic fabric to replace them with facsimile movie prop objects to make it look like World War II. And this space, like some of the ones we were in earlier, was heavily damaged by water deterioration coming through the deck. So that gave us it destroyed the original stuff and it gave us the impetus to replace it with the new stuff that you see now. Again, this guy's important enough, he gets his own head. He also would have had a door up forward here leading into the next space, which we'll go into. And during World War II, those doors didn't have doorways, they just had curtains. So we've reproduced that, although in her 80s configuration, that door has been blanked over. The next space is the Combat Engagement Center. We've done a ton of stuff in there, so we're not going to go in there. But that is as far forward as you can go on the interior of the O2 level up here. Originally, that was the Admiral's flag cabin. That would have been in 1944 when Admiral Spruance was on board. When Halsey comes on board, they rearrange things to make them bigger for his significantly larger 3rd Fleet staff. And so that becomes more of the Admiral's ward room / conference room type area. And then, of course, later in the ship's career, it gets turned into the Combat Engagement Center. Meanwhile, over here, we have SSES, Ship's Signals Exploitation Space. This is where the spooks would get Russian signals data and then try to translate it, decode it, things like that. There is a keypad here. You got to put your hand over the top so somebody looking over your shoulder can't see what numbers you enter. But typically this space would be guarded by a Marine and you'd only be going in here if you were absolutely required to. Hence all the extra security. This space, which the museum uses for telephone repair, and at the end of the ship's career seems to have just been the vestibule to SSES, was once the Admiral's pantry. Remember that dumbwaiter over there? So this is where the Admiral's steward would plate his food and prepare it prior to bringing it into the stateroom, which would have been through here. Notice you've got another keypad here to get into the door, and then SSES, where we are now, is one of the few spaces that the Navy took almost everything with them. So it could not be restored to look like it would have in service. We don't have pictures of it. The blueprints don't specifically say what equipment was in here. We just have empty mounting points on the deck. So this is where our modern equipment that runs the ship's televisions and the equipment that's in CEC that keeps it lit up that you can see on the tour route, this is where all those players live. In service, this first area we entered would have been where the Admiral's actual sitting room is, whereas back here is where the Admiral's head and his bedroom were. At that time, this exterior bulkhead seems to have come into the space a little bit further, and there would have probably been a bulkhead about right here on this frame. If this wasn't insulated, we could probably see the weld marks. So that would have been the dividing thing between his bedroom and his sitting room. In 1982, when the ship is being reactivated, the Navy guts all of this, throws it into a dumpster in Long Beach, and repurposes it because Battleship New Jersey continued to see active service for decades after World War II. So that is a walking tour of the forward O2 level, specifically spaces that you don't generally get to see when you come out for the regular tour of the ship. If you enjoyed this style of video with walking tours, let us know in the comment section down below what are some decks that you would like to see in the future. We've got the aft O2. We've done some of the P-ways around the ship. Those will be linked down below. So if there are some other decks of the ship you'd like to see us walk through, let us know in the comment section down below. Maybe we'll get to it in a future video. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.